So, what tools do you actually need to make a zine? I've been making zines, small publications, and attending art book fairs for the better part of the last 5 years. And over that time, I've figured out what tools are worth it and what ones I shouldn't have spent my money on. So whether you're just getting started with your first zine or you're looking up for a few tools to level up your zine making process, this is my guide to the Zine Artist Toolbox. Let's start off with the beginner's toolkit. So if zines are new to you, you might be making them in a smaller space. I know when I started out, I was making most of my publications in my house, so I didn't have a lot of space for big professional tools. But I found I didn't really need them. Here are a couple of my most trusted tools that are simple to keep in your house or a small space, and a couple of simple upgrades I would recommend to make the process go more smoothly. One of my most used tools is this. It's a bone folder, and you use it to make a nice clean crease in your zine's pages. This is really useful, especially with simple zine formats where having nice, precise folds is really important. Having one of these also makes it so you don't have to constantly touch the paper with your hands, which is really useful when you're using inks that might smudge. They're really inexpensive. Maybe I spent $1 on this bone folder, and they're just an easy, compact thing to have around the studio. Another easy upgrade I would recommend is swapping out your pair of scissors for a nice X-Acto knife or precision cutter like this one. There are a lot of nice brands you can buy. There's not any particular one that I would recommend, but this one is a Japanese brand, and you can always get rid of the old part of the blade and keep breaking it off to have a new sharp edge every time you cut. Along with an X-Acto knife, you will probably need a ruler if you are measuring and cutting anything. I recommend, if you don't already have a metal ruler, to swap out your plastic or wooden ruler for one of these. You won't accidentally cut into the ruler, and you can even buy a version with a little guard on one side, and that really helps protect your hand from any cuts or accidents. So ideally, if you can find a metal ruler with a little guide, that would be your best bet. Of course, if you're going to be saddle stitching your zine, you will probably need a stapler. And you probably have a simple one like this in a desk drawer somewhere. I think we can upgrade this for a slightly better version. A lot of people have long arm staplers because you can adjust it, but even better than this, in my opinion, is the following stapler. This is a boss stitch stapler with a little groove, so it's really easy to lay down your zine and staple in the exact place that you need. A long arm stapler works fine too, but if you can, I feel like this makes the process go by a lot easier, especially when you have a lot of zines to staple. And I feel like it's a little bit easier to adjust versus with a long arm stapler, you have to keep changing the guide, and it can be a little bit fiddly. So this would be my recommendation. And the last little upgrade I would recommend is a scanner. Scanners are relatively inexpensive. I think I bought this one secondhand for around 30 bucks, and they're a lot cheaper than buying a printer scanner combo. You really don't need your own printer to make your own publications or zines. You can easily go to print shops and have someone print that on demand for you. But having a scanner is super useful when making zines because it just adds a layer of customization, in my opinion. Like, I can scan in textures or illustrations, and it just adds a little bit more of a special touch, especially if you want to get into collage or incorporating some things that you've made with other mediums into your digital zine. Lastly, a couple of small tools I keep around the studio are these three things. I like having a glue stick handy. This is a Yoo-hoo stick. It's a German glue stick, but you can just buy them on Amazon. They're acid-free, so they're really great for art projects, book projects, zine projects. I also have an awl handy. I don't usually bind things with thread, so for me it's not important to have a super expensive one, but just something with a metal tip that makes it easy to poke holes in paper, because occasionally that's something that is very useful to have around. And I like keeping little binder clips like this handy because it just helps me keep pages together, especially while stapling or doing fiddly things with paper, so that the pages don't move around, and kind of a cheap way to clamp paper together. Now let's move on to digital tools. Of course, you can make things the old-fashioned way and photocopy things that you cut by hand or collage, but having digital tools makes it a little bit easier to fine-tune things, customize, add bits of text, and add images that you've made digitally as well. I use Procreate a lot for preparing all of my illustrations, but then afterwards I usually need to arrange all of those illustrations and format them. You can use Adobe programs for this, and those are probably really popular among professionals, but a lot of people don't want to pay for the full Adobe suite and all of these little bits of software that you can really rack up, and it becomes super expensive. So as an alternative to that, I would recommend using Kittl to design your zine. Kittl is an all-in-one design platform, and you can use it to lay out your zine or edit bits of text, edit your images in a really intuitive way. For example, I run a zine workshop out of my studio, and so a lot of the people I work with have never made a zine before. Usually people will submit different images and I have them cut them out, lay them out, and then I use my scanner to scan them into the computer and edit them. So I would say one of my favorite things about it is just the accessibility and the fact that you can work on designs with people who aren't designers or who don't have a background in illustration or using these programs. You can easily do things like remove backgrounds and turn your graphics into vectors. So it makes a lot of these kind of complicated seeming tasks really easy for beginners when they're designing their first zine. So for example, for my zine workshop, I'll often make the template and then I can send that to any participants or people who want to print. They can use it to refine their design, and I can help them throughout the process without them having to buy all these programs or invest in the full Adobe cloud because Kittl's free. You can try Kittl for free today using the links in the description, and I've also made a few zine templates that you can try to use, like the simple 8-page zine template or this other interesting folding zine. So you can try them for yourself and get started with Kittl for free today. But what if you already have all of these basic tools, but you're looking for a way to kind of upscale your process and make it flow a bit smoother? You might be wanting to make larger editions of work or just have more consistency with the work that you make. There are 2 tools that I would recommend that are worth it if you want to invest a little bit more money into your zine production. So while you don't need a printer, I think if you want to level up your zine making a little bit, having your own printer is super useful. Obviously, I have a Riso printer here, and I don't think that everyone needs to buy a Riso printer. It's a very specific printer and setup, and it's quite large. But there are a lot of really nice inkjet printers, and even if you're going to use some kind of specialty printing for your final zine, having a printer is super useful just to make zine dummies, make samples, really refine your design and be able to have a physical copy of it before you go to the place to print the final zine. If you want to have a certain quality of image, or if you're going to be using it more for making samples and prototypes, and use that to decide which printer works for you. The second tool I would recommend for upscaling your process is a good stack cutter. At the studio, we have a relatively reasonably priced one, so it can cut around 150 pages maybe, but it definitely makes trimming books and making the edges look nice and neat a lot easier. When I was first starting out, I was cutting everything with either an X-Acto knife, which is possible, but a little bit inconvenient for making large editions of zines. And I also did try a slightly less expensive cutting gadget, so that would let me cut only like 5 pieces of paper at a time or something, and the blade got dull super fast. So I would skip these kind of very mid-level cutters and I would upgrade to just a normal stack cutter, and you can replace the blade. So even if it gets dull, you can keep using it. Finally, I want to make a note on some tools that I don't think have been worth it. So in addition to that weird kind of mid-level stack cutter that really didn't make my life any easier, another tool that I would skip is anything that's extremely specific. So for example, I have this little corner rounding tool, and while this is cool to have and sometimes fun to use, I really don't use it much, and I find it more of a nuisance than anything to be like individually rounding corners on a full edition of zines. Another really specific tool that I don't know is worth it is something like this. So this tool I've used for calendar projects in the past because I can perforate the calendars. You can have all of these different like cutting options like wavy lines. You can basically cut like one piece of paper at a time, and it has a little guide on it. I think tools like this, if you are not having a very specific project in mind, like for the calendar, is quite useful because I knew I was going to be perforating a ton of pages. But if you just think, oh, that looks fun and unique, I wouldn't buy it because the probability of it collecting dust in a corner is pretty high. So maybe buy a fun little tool like this if you have a really specific idea and project in mind for it that you know 100% you're going to use it. But if you just think it looks fun and has potential, I would skip it for now. And that is a Zine Illustrator's toolbox according to me. If you guys have any of your favorite tools, let me know what they are down below. And until then, I will see you very soon. You can also find me on Patreon in the meantime. And for all those templates and info on using Kittl to design your next zine, check all the links in the description. See you soon. Bye.